So you're all very welcome. Thanks for coming to the seminar. So I'm planning on running one of these every month up to May and June time before you all get too busy. So I'm delighted to welcome Nikki Jennings here from the James Hutton Institute in Invergowrie, isn't it? Near Dundee in Scotland.
Close, Invergowrie.
Invergowrie, sorry. And Nikki is a breeder there for at least the last 25 years, and she has a lot of experience in breeding. You were involved in the breeding programs for blackcurrant, raspberry, and specifically, weren't you?
Raspberry and blackberry.
And blackberry specifically.
Yeah.
So your main forte at the moment is raspberry, isn't it?
Yeah, most of my work's concentrated on red raspberry.
Okay. So one of the main reasons why I wanted to ask you onto the webinar as well was to link up with you, of course, but we're always looking for new raspberry varieties, and we find in a lot of cases they're tied up with some of the varieties we can't get our hands on because they're tied up with legal agreements. But I know a lot of your varieties aren't quite like that. So, and over the years, we've been growing all the Glen series, over the last 30 years or 40 years. We've grown the Glen Moys and those, and now Glen Ample will be one of the most popular raspberries here. So did you were working with Rex Brennan, who was one of the main breeders there, weren't you? That's probably where you started out.
Yes, when I started, Rex Brennan was the blackcurrant breeder for nearly 40 years. And he's just retired a couple of years ago. But yes, with Rex Brennan on black currants and Ronnie McNichol on raspberry and blackberry at the time, and Derek Jennings prior to him, who bred Loch Ness and Glen Ample and most of the early Glens as well. And then he went on to start his own breeding program down in Kent.
Okay, so yeah, you've had a very long tradition though. Your raspberry industry, you had a huge raspberry industry at one stage back in the 80s and the 90s. And why did where did that all come out of? Do you have any? Why did such a big soft fruit industry develop up there?
The institute itself was started in the 1950s, and it was started to address the raspberry problem at the time, which I think turned out to be phytophthora root rot. And the breeding programme started soon after with Derek Jennings started on the project, and he came up with Glen Clover back in the late 60s, and then Glen Moy and Glen Prosen. And it kind of all just started from there. There was already a well-established breeding programme down in Kent at East Malling, who produced Malling Jewel, Malling Leo, and Autumn Bliss. So we were quite a recent addition in the UK to raspberry breeding, but Derek Jennings was very well known for his work on raspberry around the world. Yeah.
And your varieties are, that people might realize, but what you breed, raspberry varieties, travel all over the world. You're not just selling them in the UK and Ireland, they're going all over Spain, Portugal, and other far-flung places.
Yeah, well, trialing's really important to us. Even if it's just down the road in Blairgowrie, getting material onto farm trials early so that the growers can compare them with their commercial production is key to releasing a good variety, a good robust variety. That and the expertise that surrounds us at the Institute. We've got pathologists, virologists, entomologists and geneticists who all support the breeding programme, and we look closely at pests and disease resistance and tolerance that private breeding programmes quite often don't have the resources to do. And we've been using molecular markers for a while, and this all helps support and speed up the breeding programme to help produce resilient varieties, which we really need these days. And it's not just looking at different geographical locations or climate change, even just a shift in production system can cause chaos with a new variety.
Yeah, you were saying to me earlier on that all the varieties have different nutritional requirements and stuff, so people have to be really careful that not to just give the same feed and the same the same nutrition. That if you get a variety and you realize you don't think it's good, it's probably because it's not been grown in the right way.
Yeah, that's right. And raspberry production, it looks increasingly like with long cane production, it looks increasingly like strawberry production, and the raspberries are only in production for a couple of years. So if the grower doesn't feel he's getting it right or optimizing the variety within a couple of years, he'll just bin it for something else, which is fair enough. So we want to arm the grower with as much information as possible on how to feed a new variety when we released it. And we're working on trials to do that just now with our new varieties to see what nutritional needs they have and optimize their feed program and make resource use more efficient, I suppose, water use and feed to try and keep the costs down as well. Yeah.
Tell us, before I let you do how long does it take to breed a new variety of raspberry, roughly?
A traditional summer fruiting type, a minimum of 12 years,
wow,
which is quite a short time scale for a woody perennial. And with molecular markers, we can probably shave an extra couple of years off of that, which is significant in terms of costs of the breeding program and costs of trials. For a Primocane, probably about 7 to 9 years.
Okay. So do you want to share your, I'll let you, because I'll keep talking all night, let you share your screen and.
Okay, hopefully.
The floor is yours.
Can you see my slides? Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Good. Well, first of all, thanks very much for giving up part of your Tuesday evening to listen to me. I've got about 30 slides or so. I'll speak for about 30 minutes. Happy to take questions at any point. I'll give you a bit of background on the Institute, and then I'll go on to describe some of the other soft fruit work, and I'll speak about the raspberry breeding, of course, and the new varieties that we just released in 2020 now. So the James Hutton Group is made up of the James Hutton Institute and James Hutton Limited, is who I'm employed by. The Institute was established as a merger between the two institutes back in 2011, between the Scottish Crop Research Institute near Dundee and the Macaulay Land Use Institute in Aberdeen. There's about 6 sites in all around Scotland, about 1,500 hectares. And the 2 main research hubs are still in Aberdeen and Invergowrie near Dundee on the banks of the River Tay, which is where I'm located and where all the soft fruit work is located. The Institute is a registered charity, and it can't make a profit. So James Hutton Limited was set up as the commercial subsidiary of the group, and they commercialise intellectual property and the science and research of the Institute. This includes plant breeding, which is funded by various industry sponsors, and commercial plant breeding generates an income in James Hutton Limited through propagation licenses and royalty collection from their portfolio of varieties, which we protect by plant variety rights. The profits generated by that are gifted back into the Institute and reinvested back into scientific research. So the main research crops at the Institute are potatoes and cereals, but we're probably best known locally for our work on soft fruit. And it's been part of the Institute's history for decades now, which we've just been speaking about. The main focus is on rubus and ribes. So rubus covers my work on raspberry and blackberry, and ribes covers the currants, but mainly black currants. Some of you will be familiar with the Lucozade Ribena Suntory programme that produces varieties that go into to make Ribena. One of the most exciting additions to the soft fruit programme is the Vaccinium programme, which is expanding very quickly, which is mainly blueberry. We also have smaller projects on strawberry, honeyberry, cherry, which I'll speak to you a little bit later on. Our leader is Julie Graham. She's a molecular geneticist, molecular breeder, and she's head of the fruit group. And like I said before, we'll have breeders and geneticists, entomologists, virologists, biochemists, and they all work on the underpinning science that helps support all the commercial breeding programs. We have a genetics group which uses an array of genetic and genomic tools which help speed up the breeding program by identifying and understanding the important traits in each crop. Hyperspectral imaging uses a multispectral camera. This is a non-invasive method to identify strength in a plant before you can see visual symptoms of stress or pathogens or disease in the plant. And metabolomics looks at flavor, biochemical compounds, and such as flavor, all the factors that affect fruit quality and plant physiology. And all this research feeds back into the commercial breeding program, supports the work, and this is what makes our breeding program special. So raspberry breeding at the Institute, we've been breeding raspberries since the 1950s, and we're well known for our Glen series of raspberry varieties. And we've released 21 varieties since the 1950s, starting with Glen Clover in the 60s. And we're probably best known for Glen Ample, which you're very familiar with yourselves. We've always followed the needs of the industry, initially the Scottish industry, and concentrated on processing and machine harvesting for many years, and the breeding program focus on selecting traits that were suited to machine harvesting, and then gradually as production changed and the Scottish industry went into decline, and then shifted its focus onto the fresh market, we started selecting for types suited to grow in tunnels and for the fresh market. So we're currently funded by the Raspberry Breeding Consortium, and this consists of monies from Scottish Government and the AHDB, and 16 different industry partners from around the UK and Europe, and they keep us focused on the needs of the industry. In a broad sense, the breeding objectives currently is to select and breed high quality raspberries suited to the fresh market, both floricane types and primocane types that are suited to low input production with reduced labour costs. We aim to breed varieties with improved pest and disease resistance or tolerance, especially to Phytophthora root rot, and we hope to do this in a shortened timescale with the use of marker-assisted selection to speed up the breeding process. So basically we want to breed new raspberry varieties that are suited across the supply chain that are also economical to grow. So the USP of the breeding programme is to use marker-assisted selection to help identify important traits early on in the breeding process to help speed up the whole process and reduce that lengthy timescale. So back in the early 2000s, Julie Graham's group started looking at resistance to Phytophthora root rot, which was top of the list of important traits and still is actually. And in 2008, she developed markers for resistance. And since 2009, we started using those markers in the breeding programme to help identify new seedlings at a very young age to determine whether or not they have resistance to Phytophthora or not. And about 40% of the crossing programme is targeted at Phytophthora resistance. And since 2009, we started off with just a tiny amount of resistance in the breeding programme, and we've managed to combine this resistance with good agronomic traits and large fruit size, good productivity and great fruit quality. And we're now at the stage where we're starting to release those genotypes to the growers to screen on farms. So at the moment, we've got 15 very promising numbered selections that have this marker that is combined with all the good fruit quality and agronomic traits. 7 of these are already in trials, and one of them we've named as a cultivar in 2020. Which brings us on to the new varieties. So we released 3 new raspberry varieties in 2020, and this was a series of firsts for us. Our first variety with the root rot marker, which is Glenmore, and our first 2 Primocane varieties, Lewis and Skye. And these are available from propagators in the UK and also Gensen in Holland. So I'll start with the Primocanes. Lewis is our early Primocane. It starts fruiting in late summer, early autumn time, a similar time to Polka, if you're familiar with Polka, and the Dutch variety Amara. It's a beautiful big red fruit, lovely big fruit size, nice and easy to pick. Plugs really well off of the receptacle. In fact, all of our varieties plug really well off the receptacle. And it fills upon it very quickly to try and keep the picking costs down. It has, during the summer season, it has fantastic flavour. It has some of the highest Brix levels we've seen during the summer. It's sweet with a low acidity that the retailers seem to like, but it also has good aromatics and vanilla notes in its flavour. It's quite a stout habit. It's quite a nice squat habit, which is nice and easy to manage. It does have spines, but nice and upright with a nice short internode length. That makes a nice bush, which is nice and easy to pick and nice and easy to manage. And it grows well in soil and in coir. So here's some data. The data I've included on these slides are from our breeding plots. And these slides will be available to you if you want to look at the results in more detail. So these, all the data on the slides are from last season's data. So there was a few quirks from last season that I'll point out during the course of the slides. But this is Lewis in comparison with Skye, and also in comparison with Kwanzaa and Amara in our plots. And it just compares fruit size dates of pick for both summer crops and autumn crops of these Primocanes. Skye is our second Primocane. It is a later autumn season, but is also a good double cropper. We think it has real potential in its long cane crop. The Primocane crop is quite late in the autumn. It starts between Quayle and Kwanzaa. But it produces, during the summer season, it produces this lovely long cane that has real high yield potential. The cane's quite vigorous. It's 2 meters plus by the end of the summer. It has very short internodes, and it has a lower chill requirement than most floricane varieties do, since it's a primocane. So bud break's very good and goes all the way down the cane in the springtime. It has real high yield potential due to its high number of laterals per cane and high number of fruit per lateral. It's absolutely loaded with fruit. And like Lewis, it's nice and easy to plug off of the receptacle to fill your punnets quickly. It can darken on the bush, so it needs to be picked quite pink, which is very easy to do to maintain its storage colour. But once it's picked pink, it really has a nice long shelf life, 10 plus days in the fridge compared with Kwanzaa. And like Lewis, it has a low acidity and a nice sweet flavour that's a hit with the retailers. But with Skye, it has real consistency in both the summer crop and the autumn crop. We think this has real potential as a good double cropper. And again, here's some more numbers for you to look at if you're interested in trialing. Nice high bricks last year, and last year we had plants that were a few years old, and we also planted some fresh plants of Skye last year, so it gave us a fresh autumn crop, which was really productive, and it gave a much bigger fruit size, noticeably different in the plots. These plots are in coir in 10-litre pots in a tunnel, and the punnet of fruit at the top is punnets that we picked in early November last year. It was really, really mild, and we were picking for such a long time. So fruit in Dundee in November is quite a feat for us. So fantastic fruit quality. So here's a comparison of Skye and Lewis, picking profiles in the summer crop and the autumn crops. During the summer last year, we had some issues with frost damage that affected Lewis, but not Skye. And Skye had a lovely long picking season during the summer. This does laten the autumn crop on the Primocane, but the fruit quality was lovely on Skye. In the trials, we're seeing Skye as having the most potential. It seems to have the best feedback, the most promising feedback, just because of its high productivity, long shelf life, and ease of pick. Glenmore is our third variety. And as I said earlier, this is the first variety that we released with the root rot marker. And Glenmore shows really good resistance in the field. We grew it in the soil for several years. It was in the soil for 7 years, and both reps showed no symptoms of phytophthora in that time. It's actually a cross between a floricane and a primocane, and it combines the best of both habits. But we are marketing it as an early floricane, since it only gives a small amount of tip fruit in the autumn. And because of the primocane habit that's in its genetics, it has a lower chill requirement compared to standard floricanes. So it doesn't need as much chill as Glenample. So it gives you nice, good bud break all the way down the cane. It's very productive and it has a really long season, producing nice big fruit. It has a more traditional raspberry flavour than Skye and Lewis, but it has these coconut notes in the flavour, which sounds a bit weird, but it actually works. And it also has really nice shelf life as well. And it performs well, it's very productive in both the soil with Phytophthora in it, and also in pots in the coir. And again, here's some more data for you to look at. Last year, we had issues with frost damage, and because of the heat that we had a cold start to the spring, and then we had a very long, warm, dry period in Scotland, and all of the floricanes seem to start at the same time, so we don't have much of a spread of season on our picking profile there. That's why everything is bunched together. We normally have a nice long spread of season with Glenmore at the start and then Glendee at the end, but we didn't get that last year. Everything looks about the same season. Everything started at the same time. So in addition to Skye and Lewis and Glenmore, we've got many more promising numbered selections in the pipeline that are on farm trials at the moment with members of the consortium. Some of these have the marker for root rot and are showing good tolerance to the disease. And some are much improved primocanes, and the floricanes are also showing good, they look like they have great potential as long cane types, as in they have a lower chill requirement, have a nice short internode length and have good bud break and nice and easy to propagate. So for the future then, as I said at the start, we want to give the grower some more information when we release a new variety, because we're under pressure to release varieties quickly. And we don't always gather enough seasons information to give the grower once we do name a variety. So we're putting together some trials to look at fertigation and irrigation, like we said at the start, but we're also looking at chill requirement. And we found out back in 2015, we had problems with bud break with our new variety at the time, Glencairn. And we'd never seen it in all the trials that we'd had previously with Glencairn. We'd never seen a problem with bud break until 2015, and realised that it seemed to have a longer chill requirement than Glenample or just about anything else. So we thought it would be a good idea to assess and compare the chill requirement of potential new varieties before release. So, and we found out that we have a real long spread of chill requirement within our germplasm, which is a great thing, which means you can breed for a low chill requirement, or if you wanted a very high chill requirement. So this is part of our screening work in the breeding programme now. So chill requirements become so important, especially with long cane production and cold storage dates. So to optimise cold storage in warm climates, or even in long cane production where you're storing canes for a long time, or just trying to store your long cane for the optimum number of hours, just to give it its chill requirement and put it in a production system. So again, this gives the growers and propagators some extra information once we release a new variety. We've got a good handle on root rot resistance, but the sponsors of the breeding programme want us to concentrate on other pests and pathogens, especially with a reduction in available chemicals. It's just becoming more and more difficult to control pathogens. So we're now concentrating on resistance or tolerance to powdery mildew, post-harvest botrytis, and also to two-spot spider mite. So we see variety differences in all of these pathogens. So we're looking at tolerant types to those pathogens. Julie Graham's groups developed molecular markers for lots of other different traits, not just for root rot resistance. We're looking at markers for fruit size, for shelf life, and for yield. And last year we had a PhD student who completed his PhD and identified markers that cause crumbly fruit, which is very interesting, which we're in the process of validating at the moment. And once those markers are validated, it means we can combine markers for with these traits with the root rot marker and screen for all of these things together. Now, it's not a replacement for breeding, but it just acts as a toolkit to help identify the traits that you're looking for and help eliminate the undesirable types early on in the breeding process. Again, speeding up the breeding process all the time. We're also looking at hydroponics to produce clean plants. We're struggling with producing clean plants in the UK. And tissue culture for raspberries seems to be very difficult to get out the plant numbers. So we're looking at hydroponics as an alternative to tissue culture to producing clean plants. Speed breeding is something that's been bandied about the breeding world for quite a few years now. And it seems quite difficult to do that on a woody perennial such as raspberry or blueberry, but there are aspects that we can speed up, such as seed germination. So we're using controlled environment facilities to help speed up parts of the breeding program, such as propagation, just to give us a head start, just to give us an extra, even if we gain an extra year, that's a huge leap for us, because the cost of running the breeding program and trials is very high. So onto the blueberries. Susan McCallum is our blueberry breeder, and she's by far the best person to speak about blueberries, but I'll give it a go. The blueberry market in the UK has doubled in value in the last 5 years and quickly took over raspberry as the UK #2 fruit, just behind strawberry. And many of the raspberry growers replaced their crop with blueberry in the last few years due to production costs and low returns. Blueberry research and breeding is pretty new to the fruit group, only beginning around 2014. And initially the breeding program, it only focused on screening existing cultivars from programs around the world to find suitable genotypes to grow in Scotland. And Susan's also looking at to improve yield and try and reduce fluctuations in production, and also use this hyperspectral imaging, this multispectral cameras, to identify stress early in the plants before you can see it visually. Also, a genetic map was developed to identify molecular markers, a bit like root rot resistance in the raspberry. And this will help Susan and other blueberry breeders to select important traits early in the breeding process, again, to speed up variety development. The program is increasing all the time, increasing in diversity, and Susan's introduced lingonberry, blaeberry, and cranberry, which will have traits useful for pre-breeding. The commercial program was set up just in 2017, and this is a private breeding program with industry partners all around the world, including Australia and South America, and it really has hit the ground running and benefited from the scientific research that Susan started 8 years previously, and uses the tools needed to develop a thriving Scottish blueberry industry. The breeding programme is focused on traits such as plant architecture, nice open and upright habit to allow good plant management, as well as ease of pick, like for the raspberry. Size, fruit size is important for filling punnets quickly, along with firmness, shelf life and productivity. And she considers the most important trait is flavour, and sensory attributes enable different brands to engage with consumers on a number of levels, and it's important to encourage repeat purchases, because flavour in blueberry is just it just varies so much, just even within a single cultivar. In just 5 years, Susan's made progress in marker development and identifying ways of speeding up the breeding process, using increasing genetic diversity and identifying advanced selections for trials. And this is huge in a blueberry breeding programme that takes such a long time. And she hasn't identified or named any new varieties yet, but she has 30 advanced selections, and some of these are being trialled in Holland at the moment. So watch this space for the future. Blackberry breeding. Blackberry has been bred at the Institute for as long as the raspberries, since the 1950s. And Derek Jennings bred Loch Ness, and we've since produced Loch Tay and Loch Marie. And we haven't, until recently, we haven't had any commercial funding to develop the breeding. It's all been done almost on a hobby basis at the Institute. But the production of some really fantastic new genetics from around the world, from the likes of Tupi, Caraca Black, and much more recently, Driscoll's Victoria, has really increased the demand for sweet-eating varieties. So a group of propagators came to us in 2018 and asked us to breed blackberries for them. They basically want a berry like Driscoll's Victoria that's available to all the growers. So they're funding a 5-year programme, and which we've just started the final year on. And they said all the focus has got to be on flavour. And they've since introduced some other traits as well, but flavour is definitely the #1 trait. So it's still very early in the process, because we're only a few years into the programme. We're just starting year 5. So we look at all of our seedlings in the soil under a tunnel, and then we assess our selections in pots. And we've been sending material to trials for the last couple of years with our members. And we've currently got 11 selections on farm with members at the moment. And we're probably still a few years away from naming a variety, but we're really excited about what we've got in terms of flavour and fruit size. So like Driscoll's Victoria, which eliminates that astringency, that bitterness taste that more traditional varieties like Loch Ness has, the retailers really like, and the consumers really like. I love Driscoll's Victoria. And breeding something that's, again, robust and productive and cheap to grow, nice economical variety. I think we're just a few years away from naming something, and it will be another loch. So watch this space. We'll be needing other trialists soon as well, once we start a new tranche of the breeding programme. So watch this space for blackberries. So other fruits at the Institute, we've got a small project looking at propagation of strawberry, which just started just last year. We've got a very small red currant breeding programme, also just started last year. Honeyberry is a recent introduction and supports the development of a Scottish industry by identifying suitable cultivars for Scottish conditions and developing potential different honeyberry products, which has been really interesting. Cherry has been adopted into the soft fruit group in the last few years. Cherry production, Scottish growers have introduced cherry production initially as a novel crop, but it's definitely expanding in Scotland. And we're at the Institute, we've got a project that addresses environmental conditions that trigger June drop, the loss of flowers and fruit during the growing season. Again, using the hyperspectral cameras and genetics, looking at that. We are also included in various berry projects around the world. We're in the Berry Value Project with Horizon 2020. Involves European collaboration with, I think, 20 different partners from 8 different countries. And we're looking to explore the most promising berry genetic resources from raspberry, strawberry, blueberry to address challenges brought by climate change and environmental preservation, and the need for new cultivation systems, as well as good fruit quality and good agronomic traits. Also, GINs, Genetic Improvement Networks, in the UK provide a link between industry and academia or research to ensure that genetic research addresses the needs of the industry. It's funded by DEFRA, and this will help tackle longer term issues through breeding efforts. So around the world, all the berry projects are all looking to climate change, addressing climate change and producing more robust, resilient varieties. Well, the Institute at Dundee is a bit like a building site at the moment, but it's very exciting. We're undergoing some building work as part of a major development. In addition, we've got some new science companies which are now located on site, and it's a bit more like a campus than an institute. We are a demonstration site for a vertical farm with IGS, and this is an enclosed and controlled environment, looking at production of high value crops. Liberty Produce are another controlled environment company looking at developing sustainable methods of producing productive and sustainable crops in hydroponics. And the multi-million pound development, 62 million we've got as part of the Taste Cities deal to develop cutting edge science, farm and field facilities. We've got the International Barley Hub, which seeks to secure the long-term future of barley production. And for us in the fruit group, the Advanced Plant Growth Centre will be a cutting-edge, enclosed, controlled environment facility. This will help us enable us to mimic different climate zones, and again, speed up the breeding process and conduct post-harvest research. So this is due to be completed in 2024, but you can certainly visit us in the meantime. So we'll have the James Hutton Institute and James Hutton Limited have a website. All of our latest raspberry releases are on there with our most recent results. We have a marketing manager, Laura Patterson, who during lockdown has developed a social media platform. We're on all the usual social media platforms and on YouTube and Twitter, and she keeps everyone up to date on all of our soft fruit work and events. So you're welcome to have a look on that. And if you're interested in trialing material, Leslie Beaton is our commercialisation manager, who you can contact at any time to to trial some of our material if you wish. And that, you'll be pleased to hear, that's about it, but I'm very pleased to take any questions. Thank you for listening.
Wow, thanks a million. That was a wonderful presentation, and there's a lot, like there's a huge amount of information in there, Nikki, that we have to absorb.
I'm sorry I went on a bit, but you're welcome.
But the work you're doing with the Floricanes and the Primocanes is fantastic. We've kind of slipped as well from using Primocanes. We've gone to a long cane, extending the season. So be interesting to do some trials. If anybody wants plants, the person to talk to is Leslie Beaton. Is that?
Yes, that's right.
That's to get an agreement.
Yes, your trial is sign a trialing and testing agreement. With the new named varieties, it's a different agreement you sign, but it's just to ensure that you're not going to propagate them and sell them illegally.
Yeah. No chance of that. If anybody has any questions, can you type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen? I think people were so glued into your presentation that nobody actually asked questions, which is a really good sign. The facility you have in the James Hutton is extraordinary too. That amount of people with all those specialisms is and do the people in the cereal end interact with all the people in the fruit breeding?
Yes, there's some projects that cross over, especially with resource use and climate change. And a lot of, even the barley and potato crops are using some polytunnels now for some projects and research. So we cross over there as well. So it's really interesting, and the use of all the monitoring technology that we all use on the soft fruit side crosses over into potatoes and cereals as well. So we probably interact a lot more than what we used to on site or between crops.
And just a technical question, like if you're trying to breed for red spider mite, tolerance to red spider mite, how do you identify something like that from when you're breeding?
Well, Julie Graham's work on the molecular side, along with one of our entomologists, Ali Carley, they done an Innovate project a few years back looking at architectural traits in raspberry and how it relates to pest and disease resistance. And we found that number of leaf hair density on the underside of leaves influences two-spot spider mite. So we're having a look at leaf hair density, but off season, because you need a microscope to do it. But you can easily see clear varietal differences for two-spot spider mite in the field, where the breeding plots have got we've got very small plots of 3 plants, 5 plants, or 10 plants in some tunnels. So we'll have maybe 60 different varieties in 3 tunnels, and everything's treated the same and everything is replicated. So if something's very susceptible, it really does light up like a beacon. So you can see clear differences, and we have almost no chemical inputs at all in the breeding plots, so we can eliminate something that's particularly susceptible early on in the breeding process.
Right. I noticed this year I saw a particularly bad case of red spider, and it almost annihilated the Tulamine, but the Glenample actually were not too bad. It was interesting, yeah. And so the tough Scottish raspberry survived.
The two-spot spider mite, but Ample's so susceptible to raspberry leaf and bud mite.
Okay.
It's terrible.
Right. That's why I wouldn't have the patience to rebreed her, because you win one thing and then you struggle with another.
Yeah, and aphid resistance we've screened in the glasshouse for aphid resistance for years for the large raspberry aphid, but resistance to the large raspberry aphid has no effect on resistance to all the other aphids. And it's all the other aphids that seem to be a problem these days.
Oh.
Last season, well, it's the worst aphids I've ever seen.
Okay. Yeah,
Absolutely.
we had a few issues as well. Yeah. There's a question here. Is leaf curling a major problem?
Not in Scotland, but it is in the rest of the UK. I think the HDB list is quite a problem actually, and it's definitely in England, but in Scotland, I don't see it or hear the growers speak of it.
Good. Another question. Any comments on SWD?
Well, still in Scotland, we've still got very, very low numbers, and we're still not sure why.
Yeah, same here.
And we're just waiting, just waiting for it to get bad. But nobody seems to have a clue why. And Norway's the same, very low numbers, even though English production's not that far away. We thought it was bad summers for a long time, or wind, but there's plenty of places around the globe that have problems with SWD that seem to have similar conditions to Scotland.
We've been running a monitoring program here for a good few years, and the numbers are very low.
Good.
Yeah.
Long may it continue.
Yeah. Are you looking at any other pests apart from red spider mite? You have plenty of pests in your breeding.
We, in the breed program on site in Invergowrie in particular, will have really bad raspberry beetle. And the growers don't really complain about it at the moment. But we've suffered from it for years, and we used the lure traps that was developed by Stuart Gordon about 15 years ago, and I thought they were bringing in more raspberry beetle. I'm sure I was wrong. I think because we are surrounded by so much of the secondary host on site, we've got a lot of hawthorn, and we seem to suffer really bad raspberry beetle. And of course we don't spray with any pesticides, which the growers probably do at that time of the season, although that's probably not going to be available for much longer. So I hope it's not a problem commercially.
In your own breeding program and in your own trials, you use almost no pesticides.
Almost no pesticides.
Wow, that's interesting.
That's to get really bad.
Yeah. So you're keeping some balance. You obviously don't need them because you've developed the balance over the years, or?
Yeah, I think especially for disease pressure on the raspberries, I don't think we suffer with post-harvest rots as much as England does. And we haven't put on a fungicide program on the raspberries since 2007. And fungicide sprays it's just such a long list of sprays in the commercial spray programs. I think, do you really need that? And I'm guessing the growers are scared not to put it on, but I think the disease pressure is much higher than what we have in the breeding program in our small plots.
Yeah.
We've also got traits in the breeding program. Hairy canes makes the varieties resistant to cane botrytis and spur blight. And it's not a trait that you often see, but Glencairn has it, and Glenmoy had it back in the day. And it means you don't get any problems with cane botrytis or spur blight.
Right. Wow.
Which is a nice story.
Wow.
But come to the Institute and I'll show you. And
You
you
won't
can
mind
see
if
all
about
these.
50 of us turn up, do you?
Aye, that's fine. Yeah, all the varieties I was speaking about, you can see them fruiting at the Institute this year.
Wow, okay. The way you're incorporating the lack of chilling as well is fascinating in the breeding program, because it's just becoming a bigger issue by the year.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock when we released a new variety, which then didn't break bud. So right. Yeah, it's a good project. We copied the dormancy project that the black currants were doing, and of course black currants have a much higher chill requirement than raspberry, so they'd already been suffering from bud break problems, especially in the south of England, for about a decade before the raspberries were suffering. So we copied their experiments to compare chill requirement, and it's nothing fancy. It's just a low cost bring big mature canes into the glasshouse after every 2 weeks over the winter to see if they break bud. And we've got a thermometer in the field to measure the temperature, so we can calculate the chill units at the time that we bring the canes in. It's a bit crude, but it's a good comparison.
Do you have many chilling units this winter?
Well, not until the middle of December. It was really mild during November, and then January has just been fluctuating up and down, and we started seeing bud break about 2 weeks ago on some of the early varieties, which is a bit of a worry, because it's bound to get frosted. So we seem to have achieved chill for most of the varieties. Some of the ones at the higher end will probably suffer, but it's the warm temperatures now that's causing everything to break bud early.
Okay.
And then the inevitable frost that's bound to come.
Can I ask you, I think this Zoom call is going to actually end at 8:30, so very quickly, I'm just looking at this slide. Which varieties do you think we should, if you were an Irish grower, like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, which you'd kind of recommend?
I would definitely go for Sky.
Okay.
And well, they're actually all worth trialing, because you never know how something's going to behave. Just small amounts of plants. If you can look after separate varieties, I'd trial them all, but definitely Sky. Glendee, quite an interesting one. And Glenmore. Lewis is nice because it's an early Primocane, and we don't have much of that in Scotland, so it's nice to see the fruit in the late summertime.
Okay, brilliant. Listen, thanks a million for this is great to link up. Brilliant presentation. Thanks for taking the time. On behalf of Teagasc and all the fruit growers and everybody watching, thanks for your information, and we'll take you up on that offer. We won't just turn up on your doorstep, though. We'll give you some notice ahead of time. Thanks a million.
That'd be good to see you.
You too.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much. And on the 15th of March is the next webinar I'm doing with your colleague down in East Malling, Adam Whitehouse, and he's going to talk to us about the new Malling varieties and his breeding program.
That'd be great.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.